Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Always excited to be back.
So this time around, we're tackling a question that I think a lot of us have pondered at some point in our lives. Does music actually help you study?
Oh, yeah. Definitely a question for the ages.
Is it the secret weapon for acing those exams?
Right.
Or just a sneaky way to procrastinate?
Right. Because, let's be honest, sometimes that playlist just turns into a full-blown concert in your head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've got a ton of research and articles from you listeners, so we're going to try to sort through it all and see if we can finally get a definitive answer.
I'm ready to dive in. I'm already kind of fascinated by the fact that we're not even sure. Like, you'd think by now we'd know for sure if music helps us learn better or not.
Right. You'd think so,
Yeah.
but it's more complicated than you'd think. It's not just about whether it boosts your IQ or not.
Right.
We've got to look at mood, focus, memory. It's a whole brain symphony going on.
It totally is. It's like music is this multifaceted tool that can affect our brains in so many ways. So, where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, I think we have to start with the big one, the Mozart effect.
Ah, yes, the classic. The idea that listening to classical music, especially Mozart, can make you smarter.
Right. I remember reading about this years ago, something about how it boosts spatial temporal reasoning.
Yeah, that was the claim. And you know what? Those early studies did show a temporary boost in certain skills, especially that spatial temporal reasoning you mentioned.
Which, for anyone who's not familiar, is basically your ability to visualize and manipulate objects in space and time, right?
Exactly. Important for things like problem solving and even musical skills, believe it or not.
So, not quite a direct path to becoming Einstein, but still pretty cool.
Yeah, not quite the magic IQ booster that people thought it was, but hey, a temporary boost is still a boost. But you know what's funny? One of the articles mentioned a study where kids who listened to the band Blur while testing actually did better than those listening to classical music.
Wait, seriously, the blur effect?
That's what they called it. And it kind of throws a wrench in the whole classical music equals genius idea. Makes you think that maybe there isn't one universal smart music.
It's more about personal preference.
Totally. Like if you enjoy the music, it can improve your mood and motivation, which in turn could help you study better.
Makes sense. It's like creating a positive emotional backdrop for your brain to work in.
Exactly. It's all about setting the stage for optimal learning. But then there's another piece of the puzzle that we can't ignore, and that's stress.
Oh yes, stress is the ultimate brain drain. But is it really that bad for learning?
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than just stress equals bad. You see, a little bit of stress can actually be helpful for memory formation. It's like a kick in the pants for your brain, telling it to pay attention. But, and this is a big but, too much stress can completely sabotage your ability to recall information.
So even if I pull an all-nighter and cram all that info into my brain, I might not be able to access it during the exam because I'm freaking out.
Exactly. Stress can basically block those neural pathways, making it harder to retrieve what you've learned, and that's where music might come in handy.
Right. Music can be a great stress reliever.
Totally. There's research showing that listening to music can significantly lower stress levels.
So less stress means a better mood, which, like we said before, can lead to better motivation and focus.
Precisely. It's like music helps to create the right mental and emotional conditions for learning to thrive.
And I've also read that different types of music can affect us in different ways. Like some studies have shown that classical music can actually lower blood pressure compared to, say, jazz or pop music.
It's pretty amazing, right? Like music is this powerful tool that can actually influence our physiology. So maybe swapping out that heavy metal for Beethoven during study time isn't a bad idea.
Right. But what about music with lyrics? Is that a total no-go when it comes to studying?
It's a tricky one. Lyrics can definitely be a distraction, especially for tasks that require intense focus.
Makes sense. It's like your brain is trying to process two streams of information at once.
Exactly. And research shows that it can negatively affect attention, working memory, even reading comprehension.
Wow, so those sing-alongs are better saved for, like, cleaning the house or something.
Yeah.
So instrumental music is generally the way to go when it comes to studying, especially for introverts who might find lyrics extra distracting.
It seems so. There's some evidence that people with more introverted personalities are more sensitive to verbal stimuli.
Okay, so instrumental music it is. But then the question becomes, what kind? Is there a particular genre that reigns supreme?
Well, there are definitely some usual suspects, classical, ambient, nature sounds. Those are always popular recommendations. But honestly, it really comes down to what works best for
And
you.
personal preference wins again.
Exactly. And there is some evidence to back that up. Like one study in France found that students who listened to classical music during a lecture scored better on a quiz than those who didn't listen to anything. But again, it's hard to say if that's because classical music is inherently better for learning or just because those students happen to enjoy it and therefore were more engaged.
Right. It's like finding the soundtrack that best suits your brain.
Yeah.
But I do have another question. What about volume? Does blasting your music help you concentrate? Or is that a recipe for disaster?
That's a great question, and one that might seem obvious but often gets overlooked. Volume really does matter. Think of it this way. Your music shouldn't be competing with your thoughts, it should be complementing them.
So, like, it's a gentle sonic hug for your brain rather than a full-on rock concert.
Hmm.
But how do you find that sweet spot?
That's where personal preference comes in again. Some people do their best thinking in complete silence.
Really? Silence makes me anxious.
It definitely does for some people, but for others, it's like pure bliss. And then there are those who need a little something in the background just to kind of even out the edges.
I'm definitely in the needs background noise camp.
Me too, probably. The point is, it's all about finding what works best for you. Experiment with different genres, different tempos, different volumes, and see what helps you find that sweet spot between focus and relaxation.
I like that. It's like Goldilocks finding the perfect porridge, only it's for your ears. Okay, so we've talked about volume, but what about familiarity? Does listening to music you already know help or hurt?
That's a great question. There's some research that suggests that familiar music might actually be less distracting than unfamiliar music.
That makes sense. If your brain isn't trying to figure out what's coming next, it can focus on other things.
Exactly. It's like your brain can kind of go on autopilot with familiar tunes, freeing up mental resources to focus on the task at hand.
So if I'm trying to learn something new, maybe sticking to my tried and true study playlist is a better bet than checking out that brand new album everyone's talking about.
That's probably a wise strategy, at least until you've got a solid grasp of the material. But there are also lots of other ways to use music strategically while you study.
Oh, like what?
Well, for example, you could use different types of music for different purposes, like maybe start your study session with some calming music to help you relax and focus.
Right. Ease into it.
And then when you need a break, switch to something more upbeat to re-energize.
I like that. It's like giving your brain a little pep talk.
Exactly. And one of the articles mentioned that there are even pre-made study playlists on a lot of the streaming services now.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah, they categorize them by genre, mood, even intended purpose, like focus or relaxation.
That's awesome. Saves you the time of having to create your own playlists. And I think one of the articles even mentioned a website called Noisely, where you can create your own custom soundscapes.
Oh, yeah, those are great for really tailoring your auditory environment to your liking.
Right. White noise, nature sounds, whatever floats your boat.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for you.
So it seems like using music strategically is key. It's not just about having background noise. It's about choosing the right type of music for the right task. And one source even suggested that it's helpful to incorporate breaks without music, just to kind of reset your focus. What do you think about that?
That sounds a lot like the Pomodoro technique, which can be super effective not just for studying, but for all sorts of tasks. It's all about working in focused intervals with short breaks in between.
So instead of just hitting repeat on your study playlist, hit the pause button every now and then and give your brain a little breather.
Exactly. It's like anything else, you need to find that balance. You can't just go full throttle all the time.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say that the relationship between music and studying is a bit more complicated than we might have initially thought. It's not a magic bullet for intelligence, but it can be a powerful tool when used strategically.
Absolutely. And what's most important is that we start thinking about music as an active tool rather than just passive background noise.
Right. It's about making conscious choices about what we listen to and how we listen to it.
Exactly. It's about being mindful of the impact that sound has on our minds and bodies and using that knowledge to our advantage.
I love that. So instead of just mindlessly hitting play on whatever's trending, we should be thinking critically about how different types of music affect us and how we can use those effects to support our learning.
I think that's a great takeaway. But all this talk about music and studying has me thinking. We've been so focused on how music impacts our ability to learn information, but what about its effect on creativity?
Oh, that's a great point. Like,
Yeah.
Does the same advice apply, or are there certain genres that are better for brainstorming and artistic expression?
Right. Does music spark creativity in the same way that it might boost focus?
That's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
Totally. Maybe we should add that to the list for next time.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's funny because we often think of studying as this very serious, kind of solitary pursuit.
Yeah, very nose to the grindstone.
But maybe there's actually more joy to be found in the process than we realize, you know?
Totally. Like learning shouldn't feel like a chore. It should be about curiosity and exploration and that thrill of discovering something new.
Right. And I wonder if maybe, just maybe, the right music can actually help us tap into that sense of joy and wonder.
Oh, I love that idea. Like music can help us rediscover that love of learning that we all have deep down inside, kind of reawaken that inner child.
Exactly. But all this talk about music and learning has got me thinking about the role of sound in our lives more broadly.
Oh, interesting.
Like, we've been so focused on the intentional use of music, right? Whether it's for studying or relaxation or motivation. But what about the unintentional sounds we encounter every day?
Oh, you mean like all the noise pollution that surrounds us?
Exactly, like the traffic noise, the construction sounds, the constant hum of technology. I mean, how do those sounds impact our well-being?
That's a great question. I know that I've definitely noticed that certain sounds, like the screech of brakes or the incessant beeping of an alarm, trigger this instant stress response in me.
Yeah.
Like my whole body tenses up, my heart starts racing, even though there's no real danger.
Yeah, exactly. It's like our bodies haven't quite caught up with the modern world. They still react as if those sounds signal some imminent threat.
Right, like we're still wired for the savannah, even though we're surrounded by concrete and traffic.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how even those seemingly insignificant sounds, the ones we often tune out, can have a real impact on our nervous systems.
So it's not just about what we choose to listen to, but also about being mindful of the entire soundscape of our lives.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that sound is a powerful force that's constantly shaping our experiences, whether we're consciously aware of it or not.
This is making me want to do a sound audit of my entire life. Like what sounds are actually nourishing me? What sounds are draining me? What sounds can I eliminate or at least minimize?
I love that. A sound audit, I'm totally stealing that. And as you embark on that sonic exploration, just remember that you actually have more agency than you might think.
Oh, I like that agency.
Right. You can choose to turn off the TV, you can close the window, you can put on your noise-canceling headphones, create little pockets of peace.
Yes. Little oases of calm amidst the chaos. I love that idea. It's like we can reclaim our sonic space and create a world that sounds as good as it looks.
Exactly. And I think that's so important, especially in a world that's becoming increasingly noisy and chaotic. We need to create those sanctuaries for ourselves, those spaces where we can truly rest and recharge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like a form of self-care, taking care of our ears and our minds.
I love that. Sonic self-care. We need to trademark that.
Okay, I'm totally feeling inspired to create my own little sonic oasis now. But, as much as I love the idea of curating the perfect soundscape, there's a part of me that also appreciates the unexpected beauty of the sounds that just happen. The birds singing outside my window, the laughter of children playing in the park, the rhythm of rain falling on the roof. Those sounds aren't always intentional, but they can be just as powerful and moving as any carefully crafted playlist.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's those unexpected sounds that truly touch our hearts and remind us of the beauty that surrounds us, even in the midst of all the noise and chaos.
Okay, so I think we've officially come full circle now.
Yeah.
From the Mozart Effect to personalized study playlists to the power of silence and the beauty of unintentional sound, we've explored a whole spectrum of sonic experiences.
We have. And what strikes me is just how interconnected it all is, right? We started out by exploring the impact of music on studying, but we ended up going on this much broader journey of sonic discovery. And it's a good reminder that everything is connected: our internal world, our external environment, the invisible forces that shape our experiences.
It's like a big, beautiful web of sound. And as we become more aware of those connections, I think we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Understanding ourselves, our world, and the forces that connect us all.
Beautifully said. But one of the things that continues to fascinate me about sound, and especially music, is its ability to transcend boundaries. It's like a universal language that can speak to something deep within us no matter where we come from or what language we speak.
It's true. And I think that's one of the reasons why this question of whether music helps you study is so endlessly fascinating. It's not just about the cognitive effects of sound, it's about the way that music taps into our emotions, our memories, our shared human experience.
And I think that's a beautiful place to leave it for now.
It is the power of music, the power of sound. It's something that will continue to fascinate and inspire us.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely be back to explore more of those sonic wonders another time.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in thinking there's one right way to study.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's this magic formula for success,
Mm.
But maybe it's more about embracing the messiness,
What?
the messiness and the imperfections,
Yeah.
and ultimately, like, the personal nature of learning.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you think about that?
I think that's a great point. I think it's so easy to get caught up in trying to do things the right way that we forget that learning is a process.
Yeah.
And it's a process that looks different for everyone.
Exactly.
So I think giving ourselves permission to experiment, to try different approaches, and to find what resonates with us as individuals
Yeah,
is super important.
I love that.
Yeah.
It kind of takes the pressure off,
Totally.
Like, you don't have to do everything perfectly.
Mhm.
You can just be curious and playful and see what works for you.
Exactly, yeah.
Kind of like how we learned when we were kids, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think we can learn a lot from kids when it comes to learning.
yeah,
They're just so naturally curious and open to new experiences.
totally.
And they're not afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly.
They see mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow.
Which is how it should be,
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't lose that sense of wonder and playfulness as we get older.
Excellent.
And maybe that's where music can come in,
Music. How so?
Like, maybe music can help us reconnect with that innate love of learning that we all have.
I like it.
Kind of reawaken that inner child
Yeah.
who's just fascinated by the world and eager to soak up everything.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it's like music can help us rediscover the joy
Yeah.
of exploring new ideas,
Mm-hmm.
of challenging ourselves, of like stretching our minds and expanding our horizons.
It's like music can open up those neural pathways and create new connections.
Totally. Like, it's not just about memorizing facts and figures anymore.
Right.
It's about making those connections and seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about understanding how everything fits together and how we fit into it all.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. But, all this talk about music and learning,
Yeah.
it's got me thinking about the role of sound in our lives more broadly.
Okay, I'm listening.
Like, we've been so focused on the intentional use of music, right? Whether it's for studying or relaxation or motivation. But what about all the other sounds that we encounter every day?
Like what?
Like the unintentional sounds, the noise pollution,
Oh, yeah.
the traffic, the construction, the constant hum of technology.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like, how do those sounds impact our well-being?
That's a great question.
Right. Like, we're so used to tuning them out, but they're still there.
Yeah.
And they're still affecting us, whether we realize it or not.
You're absolutely right. I think we often underestimate the impact of our sonic environment.
Yeah.
We might not be consciously aware of it, but those sounds are still getting processed by our brains, and they can have a real effect on our mood, our energy levels, our stress levels.
Totally. Like, I know for me,
Yeah.
certain sounds, like the screech of brakes
Oh, gosh.
or like an alarm going off, trigger this instant stress response.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's like my body just goes into fight or flight mode,
Yeah.
even though there's no real danger.
It's like our bodies are still hardwired for a different time,
Yeah,
Back when those kinds of sounds might have actually signaled a threat to our survival.
exactly. Like, our brains haven't quite caught up to the modern world.
Right.
It's funny, right?
It is.
Like, we've come so far technologically, but our bodies are still reacting as if we're out in the wilderness.
Yeah, it's amazing how powerful those primal instincts still are.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think it just goes to show how important it is to be mindful of the sounds that we surround ourselves with.
Absolutely. I think we need to start taking our sonic health more seriously.
Right. Like, it's just as important as our physical and mental health.
Exactly.
So it's not just about what we choose to listen to, but also about being mindful of the entire soundscape of our lives.
I love that phrase, soundscape.
Right. Like, our lives have a soundtrack, whether we realize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the power to shape that soundtrack.
Yeah,
To make it something that supports our well-being rather than something that depletes it.
exactly. And it's not always easy, but it's definitely worth the effort.
Okay. So how do we do that?
Well, I think the first step is just becoming more aware.
Aware.
Yeah. Like
Right.
actually paying attention to the sounds that are around us,
Yeah.
noticing how they make us feel. And then we can start to make conscious choices about the sonic environments that we create for ourselves.
This is making me want to, do a sound audit of my life.
A sound audit.
Yeah. Like going through and identifying all the different sounds that I'm exposed to on a daily basis, and then figuring out which ones are nourishing me
Yeah.
and which ones are draining me.
Interesting.
And then I can start to make changes,
Like what?
Like maybe I'll start wearing noise-canceling headphones more often.
To block out the unwanted sound.
Exactly. Or maybe I'll make more of an effort to spend time in nature.
To soak up the good sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll even start incorporating more intentional sounds into my daily routine.
Like what?
Like listening to calming music or nature sounds. Or maybe even just sitting in silence for a few minutes each day.
That's a good one.
Right. Just to give my ears a break.
Absolutely. I think we often forget how important silence is. It's like a reset button for our brains.
Totally. And it's not just about making our lives quieter.
What else is there?
It's also about making them more beautiful,
Beautiful.
Yeah, like filling them with sounds that uplift us,
Okay.
that inspire us, that make us feel alive.
Like that.
Yeah, it's about creating a sonic landscape that supports our well-being
I love that idea.
and that reflects the beauty that we want to see in the world.
That's beautiful.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We started out talking about music and studying,
Right.
but we ended up going on this much broader exploration of the role of sound in our lives.
It's amazing how these things connect, isn't it?
It is. It just goes to show that everything is interconnected.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes the study of sound so fascinating. It's like a window into the interconnectedness of all things.
I love that. And I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up our conversation for today.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this sonic journey.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.